Welcome once again. Welcome to the afternoon session. Before we begin, I have a small announcement to make. We have English interpretation for our participants who are remotely connecting. They may listen to English interpretation. We are going to discuss COP27. It has been discussed. It has been referred to by many. It took some time and then it came to an end 2 weeks ago. One of the discussions is about the promises. We'll listen to different things from the activists and from the company. So we are going to discuss that with Dr. Ümit Şahin from Istanbul Politics Center. He is the coordinator at the center at Sabancı University. Losses and damages are being discussed at this meeting, so he is going to share those with us. So Dr. Şahin is connecting remotely. He is going to be addressing us now. Hello. Hello, welcome. Thank you. We are looking forward to hearing from you, sir. Our participants in the room, as well as our remote participants, are looking forward to listening to you, what the discussions were like, whether the expectations were met. We will discuss that with you, and then we may have a small chat. Thank you very much for your participation, sir. Thank you. Thank you. I would first of all like to thank you for your invitation. I have a presentation. I suppose you can see it on the screen. Yes. Now, as you know, today it was in November that COP27 was organized. Let's discuss that. But I'm not only going to tell you about what happened at COP27. Parties have come, they reached an agreement. But before I go into that, I would like to briefly take you through the current situation so that you may settle it down in a context. It's more than international climate policy or presentation. So as you know, on an annual basis, we have COP summit, and the most recent reports are being disclosed about the emissions, about the commitments and how we are doing. These are called synthesis reports. I'm taking this as the starting point. As you know, climate action has many pillars like mitigation, adaptation, financing. All of these are called the climate action. How we are doing based on that and what we should do to stop climate change, how we are performing. So let me start with that before I go into the details of the summit. To start with, I have this data. This is from the most recent report. Global Carbon Project generates presentations and reports, and this year this was delivered in Sharm el-Sheikh, and this shows the atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration as of last year, 2022 rather, correct the speaker. 2022 average is 417.2 ppm. This is the carbon dioxide concentration, and you see that it used to be 277 ppm. So this is increasing quite significantly. It is approximately 2.5% per annum, and it is 51% above the level we had during the Industrial Revolution. And no change has taken place in the pandemic, actually. Again, according to IPCC's most recent report, this shows that average temperature increase is 1.1 degrees Celsius, again, when compared with the average of pre-industrial term. So without any human factor, we would be continuing with that green line you see at the right bottom hand side. That would show that without the human factor, that would be our level. However, with the human factor, it's 1.1 degrees Celsius, and this is the speed that we have, especially after 1980s. It has gone dramatically up, and year by year, we are breaking new records. This was actually in the history of humankind. This was back in 2016 that we had the hottest year, and then 2021 was yet another record year. We continue to get warmer. 2022 looked relatively cool, but then again, according to Meteorological Organization's report, 2022 average is 1.15. Not much different from 2016. And as you know, La Nina conditions, that's the blue area near the Pacific, when there is a hot current, and when it is red, it is it is actually red, and when it is cold, it it turns uh, it turns blue. So this is going to be one of the hottest years among the 5 or 6 years. And
Hatırlarsınız. Bu haritada yeşil görünen yerler normale göre aşırı yağış alan
when
yerler.
compared with the green ones, these are the areas where we receive rainfall, especially when you look at Pakistan. One of the most historical floods has taken place. And again, around China, we have significant increase in rainfall. However, in the brown areas, that's Northern Africa and Europe, because of the heat waves, um, there have been incidents of drought. As you will recall, the Rhine River also has dried. This is another thing which is monitored. This is the increase in sea level. It continues to rise. 4 million liters of increase. What about the emissions? Let's take a look at that. Against all the effort, this shows 2022 projection, but then again, this always is proven to be true every year. 2022 has not come to an end, fine, but then again, fossil carbon dioxide emissions you see on the screen, it also includes other soil use, and the greenhouse effect is not included. But here you see that 31.5 gigatons will be the global fossil carbon dioxide emission, and it will be another record. During the pandemic, there was an abnormal decrease, and it was left as an abnormality. Unfortunately, the rising continues. Where exactly, you may ask? In China, it continues, but then again, this year it came down to 1%. I mean, it was reduced by 1.4%, probably due to the COVID measures. But then again, in the last few years, we know that the trend is upward. US has started increasing. This year, it was 1.5%. EU has approximately 1% decrease. India is increasing dramatically. It's nearly 3% this year, and other countries have similar trends as well. Let's now take a look at the historical cumulative fossil carbon dioxide emissions. This is where we are. Brown part should be included to consider 2022. USA is leading the way. EU 27 is number 2, China number 3, and UK is number 5. Even India is included in the top 10 when it comes to the cumulative one. So, which fossil fuels are on the rise? Well, all of them, I would say, are on the rise. But this year, specific to this year, because of the energy crisis, gas did not increase that dramatically. You see nearly 0.2% 8% decrease. But then again, because of Indonesia, Turkey, and some other countries, there seems to be a bit of an increase when it comes to coal. Coal actually has started to go flat after 2010, but then again, it is on the rise, and so does oil. Cement has decreased from the emissions perspective. So where are we heading for? Well, for 1.5 degrees Celsius, where are we? This is the carbon budget calculation. As you know, the carbon budget is making the calculations, and to ensure that the increase is limited to 1.5 degrees, it shows the cumulative carbon amount released. The total 1.5 degrees budget, most of it, I would say, so far, 2,495 already consumed. 380 gigatons is the remaining amount. You will recall from the other graphics, 40 gigatons of release on an annual basis. So we have less than 10 years. If we continue with the same speed, we will be consuming the whole budget for 1.5 degrees Celsius. All the assumptions are suggesting that we will actually reach 1.5 degrees before 2030. So 1.5 degrees is apparently inevitable.
Soru cevap kısmında bunu
If you
biraz
like,
daha
I can go into the details of that towards the end during the Q&A session. 1,230 gigatons if we stick to 2 degrees Celsius, but no one actually moved a step from the target, so it's 380 gigatons. So what has happened at COP27?
bir nedir COP27?
Let's start discussing that, but let me introduce what COP conferences are. We have three Rio conventions. We have the biological diversity. COP15 was held in Canada, and we have UN Convention to combat desertification, and we also have UN Framework Convention on climate change. So these are the three Rio contracts. One to me was first actually held in 1992, and then Kyoto Protocol was prepared in 1997, and then in 2007 the preparations they've been made. In 2009 it crashed. In 2010 they revived it, and then we had the Paris Agreement in 2015, and then 6 years. I mean, we had an interval for the pandemic. So for 5 years, the commitments have been taken, and finally, Glasgow Climate Pact has been prepared in 2021, and since 2020 it is in implementation, but because of the delay, because of the pandemic, it was completed in 2021. The Climate Pact, after the Climate Pact in Glasgow, the implementation plan has been introduced at Sharm el-Sheikh. The biggest discussion about COP was this presidency, the term presidency of Egypt was saying that it is going to be the year we will start with the implementation. Has that become a reality? That's something we will now be discussing. These are just quick reminders. As you know, the Annex 1 countries, 40 countries are in Annex 1, Turkey included. Annex 2, important from the finance perspective. Turkey is no longer a part of that. There are 22 countries, if I'm not mistaken, says the speaker. OECD's rich countries, I should say, are included in this Annex 2. Annex A of Kyoto Protocol is also important. We have 7 gases here that we have to restrict. These are the greenhouse gases based in 5 sectors: energy, industrial processes, solvent and other productions, agriculture, and waste. So 5 sectors, 7 gases are to be restricted. And the most important is carbon dioxide, of course. And as for climate change regime, the elements of climate change regime are, as you see on the screen. We should also touch upon that. These are the things that are being discussed. It is not limited to those two, three topics covered in the media. Mitigation, emissions reduction is, of course, very important, but adaptation, loss and damage, climate finance, emissions trading, technology transfer, capacity building, and measure, report, and verify. It's abbreviated as MRV, measure, report, and verify. And these are this is the process discussed at COP27.
Çok önemli çünkü bütün
And we also have party groupings because these party groupings are not actually um, the discussions are not among the countries but among the groupings. Um, G20, G77 is very significant because those are the developing countries, including China. We have some subgroups. For instance, the Pacific Islands, AUSIS, are mainly composed of the Pacific Islands. LDC is least developed countries. We have the African group. We have the Rainforest Nation, Coalition of Rainforest Coalitions. They are mainly developing countries. The most important developed group is the EU, of course. UK has left that group, and we also have developed countries outside the EU, like the umbrella group, like USA, Australia, Canada are included. This year, there was a specific thing. Belarus and the Russian Federation have been sent away from the group. All the umbrella grouping said that we are not collaborating with Belarus or Russian Federation, so they were left outside. And there is
grup var.
also the environmental integrity group.
Bir de hiçbir gruba ait olmayan ülkeler var. Çok az sayıda. Şu anda İngiltere
And
onları.
there are some independent countries. UK has joined this group. Probably they will be a part of the umbrella. Turkey, for instance, is one such country not included. It's an old graphic. Belarus is seen here, but Belarus is now in the umbrella. And Croatia has joined USA, but then again, Turkey has not joined in any party groupings.
Paris Anlaşması'nın
Paris Agreement.
bir anlaşma olduğunu hatırlatmak.
Paris Agreement is a rights-based agreement. We are talking about a reduction in emissions, but then again, the Paris Agreement, this was actually repeated many times at COP27 and decisions have been taken. Human rights, indigenous people's rights,
Özellikle vurgu
specific
yapan.
attention and emphasis on human rights, indigenous people's rights, public participation, gender, social gender, an action plan for social gender has been discussed, just transition, ecosystem integrity, and rights of Mother Earth, protection of biodiversity, food security, intergenerational equity. So this was forming the basis of the Paris Agreement. Currently, all countries are party to this agreement. Eritrea, Yemen, Iran, and Libya are the countries outside the scope, but other than that, all countries, including the EU, are parties to the Paris Agreement.
Başlıca hedefi küresel sıcaklık artışını 1,5 dereceyle
keeping the global temperatures rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, review of each country's contributions every 5 years, and regular reporting of that. And as of 2025, $100 billion will be provided by the developed countries to the developing countries. These are the main objectives. And the formula for 1.5 degrees Celsius comes from Glasgow Pact and Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan. It has been verified at Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan. This is a GOP formal decision. By the year 2030, we will lower the emissions below 40%, and by the year 2050, it will be net zero. This is what will happen with net zero. Emissions, even if we can't reduce them to zero, carbon dioxide removal technologies that are assumed to be developed after 2050, we will be aiming to reduce it a couple of tons. That is the formula for net zero. If net zero is achieved, again, we will go beyond 1.5 degrees, but then again, it is stabilized. And 1.5 degrees, we will even go below 1.5 degrees. So this is the formula we have to achieve. If we can achieve that, and if we can reduce emissions, then we will be below 1.5 degrees. And according to IPCC and many scientists, this is still possible. 1.5 degrees at some stage, there is an overshoot. It overshoots at some stage. That's an important concept, actually, overshoot. But still, even if we have the overshoot, keeping it below 1.5 degrees Celsius is our main target. We do not make any concession. 1.5 degrees and net zero emission. In order for this,
daha ayrıntılı formülde
I mean, there's a more detailed formula for this. International Energy Agency published a report, net zero report, and according to this report, no thermal coal power stations have to be established. Developed countries and developing countries should be phasing out from coal, respectively, and net zero emissions will be on the forefront as power is generated, and by 2050, 70% of power production will be from wind and solar. And for transportation, as of 2030, all global automotive sales will, I mean, to a certain extent, they will become EVs, and
gibi.
And heavy vehicles will also become electrical vehicles. And here you see the blue zone. The blue zone is going to be carbon free, and then the industry and other sectors will go towards zero emission. This is the formula of International Energy Agency, and all countries have accepted that. Only a few countries have not taken any net zero target. 88% of the global emissions covered. Turkey also disclosed 2053 as the target. These countries have some climate targets, and some countries have updated their targets or reinforced their targets this year. But against this all, unfortunately, the current policies don't help much with the degrees. 2.7% Celsius is the temperature we are heading towards. So if we include the target for 2030, 2.4 degrees Celsius is the average temperature. All LDCs have to be realized. So for them, the warming will be 2.5 degrees. That's going to be guaranteed, unfortunately. The optimistic scenario mentioned here is
sözlü
all commitment, all net zero targets. For instance, Turkey does not have any plans for net zero, but still comes up with a net zero. So if we include them all, then it's going to be 1.8 degrees Celsius. But then again, this optimistic scenario does not have any foundation. We are strongly heading towards 2.5 degrees Celsius. While the biggest share belongs to United States, as you know, after Biden, US has made some commitments for reduction. China also has some targets. They are reducing, and other countries' reduction commitments are increasing, and in the end, there seems to be a slight reduction. There is no US. US is included in this. So when you consider the targets of all countries, you see that no country actually declares sufficient targets. This is according to climate finance rating. EU, Germany, Norway, Switzerland, even these countries are insufficient. And there is um, Australia, Russia, and United States with critically insufficient targets. These are insufficient. Even if these targets are all achieved in 2030, 23 gigatons of emissions will be talked about. So even the conditional targets, even if the conditional targets are realized, that they are all tied to the financing, even if they are kept as promises, by the year 2030, we will be 20 gigatons more than promised. 40 gigaton is, sorry, says the speaker, this is the greenhouse gas. So 54 gigatons of greenhouse gas. There's going to be a gap of 20, and this gap has to be filled in. Let me now come to COP27 results, and I'm then going to touch upon Turkey. At COP27, successful results have been received, and there have been some disappointments as well. I mean, there are some successful ones and some disappointments. Green ones are the positive ones. For the first time in Glasgow, it is no longer an option. 1.5 degrees is um, verified as the target. There were some concerns that steps would be taken the other direction or backwards, but that has not proven to be the case. 1.5 degrees have been verified by all countries. Climate actions of all countries will have to be in line with 1.5 degrees. But then again, as I've said before, sufficient reduction targets have not been put forward for 1.5 degrees. New countries like Turkey came up with new targets, but most of them are insufficient. For instance, EU increased from 55% to 57%. Commitments are insufficient. So we're still not on track for 1.5 degrees. But as you know, after the war broke in Ukraine, energy crisis
Avrupa'nın bile
somehow
kömüre
invalidated the climate action. Even Germany went back to coal. This is not conceptually supported, as you know. I mean, returning to coal, it's it's out of question that the EU is returning to coal. The same rule applies to other countries, but um, countries that don't have a target didn't have to change much, but no step backward in US or in other countries. But there is a propaganda, especially by the coal producers and fossil fuel producers. COP27 actually did not validate that. Just on the contrary, energy crisis may not prevent climate action, and the main remedy will come from the climate action. We should actually leave the fossil fuel. All the leaders, nearly the leaders of all important countries, confirmed that.
kömürün azaltılması hedefi biliyorsunuz
Reduction of coal, as you know, in Glasgow for COP26, this was for the first time introduced there, and there were concerns that this could be diluted, but no, there were no such attempts for dilution. But then again, it's not going to be a phase out from coal, but phase down from coal. Especially the EU and US emphasized something. Emission rate for 2025 will be at its peak, and developing countries did not accept that. And 25 year 25 being the peak year comes from IPCC report. However, in developed countries, they wanted to make this summit decision. They believe that US is going to make a peak. That's why they wanted that. But countries like Indonesia, Turkey, Brazil, South Africa, China, and India, they don't want such a peak year. They want, at least for their own countries, they want to see the emission rates increasing. Just imagine China and India are not making any peaks. Other countries won't be able to make any peaks. That's why they prevented the target to pass. That was negative. Um, Fossil fuel incentives are to be terminated. This was the target. To dilute that, there was a suggestion After all, putting an end to fossil fuel incentives, there is a term referred to as insufficient subsidies. But what is sufficient and what is insufficient? That's ambiguous. That's why this was wrong. And there is also fossil fuel incentives, um, which are rationalizing. They came up with this classification, but then again, they excluded that. Climate action objected to that, so it was not accepted. So fossil fuel incentives will be phasing out, and this is being kept as a target. Unfortunately, phase out has not been accepted for fossil fuels. This is interesting. Prior to COP27, this was not said to be included in the agenda. Climate action even didn't have such a big aspiration. But during the initial years, India came up with this interesting move. Last year, coal phase out was modified as coal uh, phase down, and everyone had criticized India. There are three fossil fuels. Let's not talk about coal only. Let's have phased out for all fuels, they said. It was a bluff, especially EU encountering an energy crisis wouldn't accept that, India thought. Especially, they wanted to divide the US and EU most probably. But interestingly, EU and US saw this bluff, and the reason why they saw this bluff was to divide the G77, because India's suggestion would disturb China, and they saw the bluff, and until the last minute, phase out of all fossil fuels um, has been defended by them. But then again, interestingly, Egypt, Russia, and other countries like UAE had some secret pressures, and of course the term presidency of Egypt was directed by those in disguise. Egypt did not include that in the drafts anyway.
Yani fosil yakıtların net olarak
So
isminin konması.
fossil fuels have to be named clearly. That's important. As for the climate financing to be clearly defined by least developed countries, this was required, because when the climate financing is not clearly defined, anything may be presented as such, and that's a big problem. No steps have been taken, unfortunately, and $100 billion climate financing to be completed. That has not been completed. It is still below 90 billion, the claimed amount. But then again, 100 billion will be made by 2024. Again, that's another claim. This has been negotiated, but no concrete result came through that finance flow increase for beyond 2025. Nothing came out of that. As for the multiplication of adaptation financing by 2 times, this was the target of last year, and I think this has been the biggest achievement. The following one, financing mechanism has been established for loss and damage, or at least it has been accepted that such a mechanism will be established. There is no established mechanism, but the principles have been decided. But still, it's a big step, because at the beginning, EU and US were reluctant for that. Only developing countries asked for this. But then again, with as a result of big negotiations, with 2 days of delay to finalized COP, loss and damage mechanism has been accepted. That's significant. That's crucial because before everything else, for climate justice, loss and damage are critical because it is to bring remedy to the current crisis by the developed countries. Such a mechanism will be supported, and this is of critical importance. And until 2024, this is going to be established. But then again, there has been another discussion, especially UK and EU wanted China to put money in this insistently, not only China. Within the climate regime, the countries like South Korea, Singapore, oil countries, Gulf countries that look, and UAE, Qatar, that look to be developing, but then again, even if they are not annexed to countries, still they have to pay for this loss and damage. But China objected to that. We're giving this bilaterally, China said. But then again, they didn't want to be a part of this multilateral regime because they didn't want to open the discussion to be included in annex to rather than a developing country. Even though Western countries said that loss and damage should not be seen as indemnification or compensation, because this is not indemnification of imperialism, but still
kurulması en azından
establishing such a mechanism at least is showing that the Western world is undertaking its responsibility when it comes to crisis and disasters. Another interesting, one of the most interesting discussions, Gordon Brown actually put this forward. Fossil fuel companies, especially after the crisis,
fosil yakıt şirketlerinin karları
their profit is multiplied by numerous times. So these profits have to be levied some taxes, he said, but it was a radical suggestion and no one accepted that. But still, having that being discussed at COP was something special, especially Al Gore's some important names, including Al Gore and some other candidate countries with Barbados, wanted to have international institutions. Should Barbados and other countries say that these will be restructured in order to recognize climate change, and one way or another this was included in the COP decision. Of course, COP can't make such a decision, but at least restructuring of international finance institutions was discussed and referred to at the closing. This is significantly discussed in the US as well. Just imagine, it has started a discussion about the restructuring of institutions such as IMF and the World Bank. And we also know that fossil fuel representatives were present at COP summit. Many protests have taken place, so that may be seen as a negativity. One final thing, I know I have little time left, so now I'm going to touch upon Turkey. For net zero emission, Turkey is quite backwards. It's 2053. But then again, in the assessment, it is unacceptable because we only have this target, but it doesn't have any foundation. Turkey's emissions are increasing, and the most recent disclosed amount is, as you know, 6.3 tons for greenhouse gas per capita. 70% of emissions in Turkey come from the energy sector, and 79% of that is carbon dioxide. This increase is on the rise. Especially agricultural emissions are quite high, and industrial process emissions as well. Energy emissions, we don't see a significant increase, but process emissions and agro business emissions are quite high between 2019 and 2020. That's important. As for As you know, this was NDC for Turkey in the past, with the scenario that, with the business as usual scenario, 1,175,000,000 would be the level for carbon dioxide emission, and we will reduce it down to 929. That was the claim. However, this reference scenario is an imaginary scenario. We all said that. You know that it's impossible that Turkey reaches 1.1 billion. This may only happen in 2075, according to the calculations. So with business as usual, even with the reduction scenario, we should be around 600, but currently it's 524 tons. So there seems to be an illogical overachievement. But reference scenario has been kept, although there has been some revision made. This 21% has been revised as 41%, but we don't have the most recent graph. They have not submitted that to the system. 693 tons, and this 929 has become 693 tons, but with the current emissions, this is 32% above the emissions. So Turkey does not come along with a decrease or reduction scenario, but with an increase, unfortunately. So overall rating of Turkey is critically insufficient. That continues to be the case. And Turkey's targets will warm the globe by 4%, 4 degrees Celsius, sorry. And this yellow bar shows it. This is the reduction scenario. 2038 will be the peak year, and then there is going to be a dramatic reduction, Turkey says. But that's not possible. That's out of question. What we have to do is the light green line. This is from our report at EPM that shows the net zero scenario, the orange one at the bottom. We foresaw a scenario with 70% reduction and 32% afterwards. But then again, the government came up with 32% increase, whereas we foresaw just the contrary. This year at Sharm el-Sheikh, we have presented the elements of this report and the cost items. On the right-hand side, you see our new report. It's available on our website. This net zero you see here has the 10 years of cost. It's $10 billion a year. The details, the sectoral details are all available in our report on our website. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Evet, Ümit Hocam, biz size çok teşekkür ederiz. Gerçekten
Professor Şahin, we would like to thank you. You really made a great summary. Indeed, the loss and damage issue is something we really have to emphasize. Maybe expectations were higher there prior to the conference. I had higher expectations because carbon emission countries that contribute to the carbon emission at a minimal level are the ones that are most harshly affected countries. We had some expectations and we had some higher targets when it comes to fossil fuel and coal, just like the last time. Thank you very much for your participation and contribution. Thank you, and hope to see you soon. Thank you. We will now be breaking for 15 minutes. For us, we have a small announcement to make. Enerjisa and V-Robur have a joint project, a robot behind.
Siz bana sayarsınız gene. Tamam. Evet, Fiziksel Varlık Yönetimi Konferansı'ndan tekrar merhaba.
Welcome back to the Physical Asset Management Conference, and now we are going to listen to a keynote speech which we have been anticipating. Olivia Masagolo is with us on energy and sustainability economy. She will hold a speech, and a macro perspective on global energy markets, long-term carbon, energy, and sustainability expectations she will talk about. On the other hand, energy generation companies and samples and comparison, green finance-based asset management. We were chatting and she is directly involved with such practices. For that reason, she will be sharing valuable information with us. Now I invite Olivia to the podium. Hello, welcome. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. We will be talking about fun topics, I believe. These are topics that everybody is paying attention to all over the world. Before we begin, before we have a general perspective on the energy market, I'd like to share a memory with you. Probably it was 10 years ago, the American Federal Energy Regulation Commission, when I first started working there, the head of the commission was a very sweet lawyer, a jurist, Sharon DeFleur. She said in 1960s, space and technologies, then started internet, then I'm talking about 10 years ago. She said, from now on, we will talk about energy. Energy will be our topic, and countries with good energy will win. And everything, all the planning, the targets will be on new energy and energy-related topics. She said, and she turned out to be right. Increasing energy has increasing significance, energy generation, energy capacity and practices, and bringing that together with sustainability. That is very fun, as I said, but it's also a confusing topic. As Ümit Bey, our valuable speaker, just mentioned, the rules, the regulations, and the frames that we're trying to set. But as I always say, let's talk some business, how this happens financially speaking. Let's talk about that as well. So, in my speech, I'd like to go over what happens this year. The data is not fully in yet, but if you look at the market in 2022, we had an energy shock as a word. We experienced an energy shock, and we will continue having it at different dimensions, at different countries. There will be different impacts. Economic stagnation is more plausible now. Are we entering a recession? Some economists say they do not expect a recession and will continue going full force. But it's also a fact that inflation is a major obstacle in order to achieve certain things. And when we look at developed countries, on average, inflation is around 8 or 9%. I'm not talking about Turkey. And the basis, the fundamental reasons of economy, at least 1/3 is energy and energy-related factors, which means energy is one of the topics which draws attention. So we had just come out of COVID. During COVID, energy markets had different trends. What kind of trends am I talking about? Carbon. When I look at carbon markets, we saw different models. Actually, when we look at the US, in compulsory carbon markets, the previous prices turned out to be low, and the markets have started to heal themselves. On the other hand, at the systems of Europe, we've seen something similar, but theirs was increasing much more than anticipated, so they were having challenges. Globally speaking, the growth in energy demand, as well as the problems because of trade have caused some energy resources to be utilized more, especially gas and coal. We talked about coal in our previous speech. We are trying to talk about it. We're trying to exit it. But the dreams and practices, the realities are different, especially because of some recent changes. There's increasing gas, coal, and carbon prices. So overall electricity prices have increased as well. Europe also is trying to import compressed gas, which is having a global reflection. What could these be? Yes, prices are going up in Europe, but for instance, in countries like Pakistan, there are problems. These countries are being driven out of markets, pushed out of markets because some energy prices are too high for them. For instance, imagine the population of Pakistan, it could cause problems. And when we look at oil prices, because we're talking about all of the energy markets, in energy markets, we have to talk about oil as well. And OPEC is insisting to continue limiting production, and they are not really stepping back despite pressure from the US. But of course, this is not like a few months ago. This seems to be in more of an order now. So when we have a general look at the markets, and we can look at it through data as well. The graph that you are seeing here is 2019-2021 data, and it is based on the year 2019. 4 different regions are compared here. As I said, the overall oil, electricity prices, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and a comparison of North America. As I said, based on the year 2019, and we see the change. Looking at this picture, in Asia Pacific, there is less fluctuation. In Europe, Latin America, and North America, there is a serious fluctuation. This is based on the end of 2021. So as you can imagine, in 2022, this fluctuation was bigger. So nothing is changing. The gap is increasing. So in general, I wanted to start with Europe. Germany, especially, is leading. For instance, this morning, there's a website which measures carbon density. Maybe some of you follow it. So yesterday's carbon density was 629 gram per kilowatt hour. So let's say just say 629 grams in the atmosphere. Yes, we don't use too much coal, we say, or we're trying to exit coal, but there are things that are needed. There are musts, and Germany is doing this by burning coal at the moment. Last year, at the end of 2021, China's carbon density was 580 gram kilowatt hour. Right now, Germany has 629, which is more than China overall in terms of carbon density. This is telling us something. No matter what we do when we face challenges, no matter how much a country says they will prefer renewables, sometimes at the end of the day, they might have to resort to coal. Similarly, the practices, the increasing use of coal and some changes are some of the developments that we see. On the other hand, I'd like to look at North America. There are some regions, for instance, Texas. Texas is a country in itself as a state. They have different laws, or they may have different rules, regulations. The capacity market is not there, which means in any way, when there's extreme air change, the weather change, they may not be ready for it. For instance, when temperatures drop, the increase, this is the reason for the increase in the overall price. In 2021, this was normally they were paying $300 or $350 per household, let's say. Now they had to face $90,000 or $10,000 per month, which may create a shock. This means we went through a very fluctuating time because of weather conditions, COVID, or unknowns of the energy markets. They could give us such surprising results. And then the east and west parts of the US, California, and the eastern side, as well as Canada, you see, Latin American countries, they have more hydro and renewable energy, but they are using natural gas as well. The ups and downs here, the fluctuations were observed in Latin American countries as well. In Asia Pacific is less, but other regions have more fluctuations. Looking at overall electricity prices, last year, I shouldn't say this year, but as we close this year, we saw what happened last year. But with that, I would like to look at the future. What do we expect and what may we see? And based on that, countries and companies, how do they prepare themselves and how are they trying to protect themselves, hedge themselves? There are problems about global energy supply, high prices, changing prices. We expect this in 2023 as well. We believe it will continue and it may from time to time become even more volatile as we deal with this. What do you do when you run into a problem? You try to generate a solution. Whether you want to or not, you have to start looking for solutions. In general, in the world, a cheaper, cleaner, and a more reliable energy system, there will be more efforts to generate such a possibility. Short-term and long-term. I would like to talk about these. In the short run, the world, as I said about Germany before, or not, don't just think about Germany, but in the short run, in many places, there will be a search for energy security. So fossil fuel and related investments will continue. You will not have the luxury to stop it all of a sudden. It will not be easy to transition. As this is happening in the long run, countries, in order to improve their renewables, they will use government incentives in their industrial policies, and private companies will be investing more into such channels and will continue their activities, increase their activities. We have to understand the difference between short-term and long-term. We are usually asked, what do you mean by short run and long run? It's very hard to say, but 2025 and 2030 are very important dates. In the short run, especially when you consider sustainability together with energy, there are energy protocols. We have certain frames, we have methods, and they all follow different roads to expand sustainability a little bit. Our protocols or our frames, I should say, you must have heard GRIs. We have GRI protocols or SASP protocols. These create you a frame, and they're not compulsory, and as you do, a short run and long run may change, but 2030 is near term, but for long run, 2040, 2050, these are defined as the long run. Science-based approaches and nature-based approaches targets are defined as two categories in science. These follow a more or less a similar timeline. In general, countries, for instance, the US, goal for net zero is 2050, Turkey 2052. But for companies, I see some companies, for instance, they want 2040. I would like to underline, by the way, that your net zero carbon or carbon neutral may not mean the same. For some companies, unfortunately, they use it as the same thing, but they're entirely different ideas, and timelines should be adjusted accordingly. Which year are you looking at? Which year is your target? It depends on that. I don't want to go into too much detail, but being carbon neutral means you are also turning a green light to offset use, but zero carbon means you are not using offset aid as well. It has offsetting and greening as well. The difference between the two affect whether you are sustainable or not. But I was in Egypt at the 27 meeting, COP27 meeting, and there was a topic that is mentioned in side panels. Your suppliers, if they're not zero carbon, are you really zero carbon or carbon neutral? How many suppliers do you have? Imagine you are having the panels built. If they don't have zero carbon targets, then you have a problem, unfortunately, because some big companies or global companies have started their work on this last year and they are investing into it heavily. ESLAC, or there are different names that are used, suppliers chain, and how they could be sustainable. We have to be careful on that as well. So the short run and the long run, based on who and how are they defined, which method, which protocol, which methods are used in defining them. They may fluctuate a bit, but at the end of the day, we're trying to get to the same point. In addition to adding the sustainability, the infrastructure challenges are important as well. For instance, grid security, security and challenges. It seems like this will be discussed, continue being discussed. Countries are making investments. An example that comes to mind is Biden's infrastructure bill. Regulations on infrastructure, $2 trillion is the budget this year, and next year they plan to increase this a bit, 2 or 2.5 trillion extra. So until 2050, the goal of being zero, and the state will have to work on it as well. All offices or all contractors, this has spread to all of them. In addition, in China, there's a spot market edition. They're giving speed, carbon is included. We have 1 year data, but at the end of this year, we will see the second year data as well, and it will be more clear in our minds. India continues working on market-based shipment, and they have some pilot practices. As I alluded to before, supply chains are very important as you're doing your production. When you have everything in order, you have to be careful about what's happening in your supply chain as well. Are they zero carbon, or what kind of problems are there, or what kind of changes in costs? These are being discussed as well, not only in energy power generation companies, but in all companies, especially for companies who deal with solar or power generation companies. They are aware that they're entering a year where they have to be careful. They know that they have to be more careful in budgeting over the next years. In addition to this, in addition to what's happening or what's being expected, what kind of preparation they have started? I'd like to talk about this as well. Renewable energy supply and projects and liabilities and responsibilities. There are some projects or some efforts on it, some renewable projects are being created. And in the meantime, energy generation companies are given big opportunities and responsibilities. As a company, you must set your sustainability goals and start working for that direction, like any company. When I go to your website, for instance, I should be able to see, just like I did, for instance, I did this for a company. What is your CDP report? Who's your board? How many? What's the percentage of your male to female ratio? These are important indicators. You're a company. I will show you a table soon. I would like to underline, even if your CDP report is good. Let's say your board consists entirely of men, there are no women, this would require more efforts. This is an important factor. In addition to all of these, as an energy, as a power generation company, you're in a very important position because you are a mediator to other companies. You are a middleman to other companies. For instance, virtual energy procurement programs, or recently, I will talk more about this, sustainable energy contracts or energy contracts are becoming more popular globally speaking. Lawmakers or investors are paying attention to certain technologies. For instance, wind technologies, battery energy storage, or open offshore wind or low energy program, or carbon capture and storage. Especially this topic, carbon capture and storage, is becoming increasingly important in Europe. They're working on it intensely. In the US, it is gaining more popularity, and nuclear is an option as usual. In addition, as I said, there are other projects or efforts, but these are our general themes. As we talk about different energy projects, sustainability, as I said, is always an important one. So, a comparison between organizations, let's see what's going on. I had the opportunity to work with many of these companies. So what kind of a method are they following? What kind of grading do they have? I have some insider information, 12 nice American or global companies, and a comparison between them. What I'm trying to show here is that Enerjisa has some data as well. Production, the generation, the CDP report. I cannot see like I see here. These are the scores based on what is available. Let's talk about Enerjisa. I know you're the generation side, and in general, you are in the low risk area, but I would like to say the following. When we look at the table, dark green is good for us and light green means problems, or F is insufficient. Dark green is what we would like to see in this color coding. On average, to give an example, if you're working with big lenders, many companies in the US, let's say, are working with JP Morgan or other investors. They have an organic link, so they like Sustainalytics to see the ranking. So you see this result, this evaluation on most of them. Low risk and high risk is usually where everybody is at, which means we have a long way. We have a lot to do. These are data of 2022, as I said. Morgan Stanley, MSCI, low, middle risk, medium risk, and high risk. I will not list all the names. You see the credit average of different companies, CDP's climate and water security ratings I like looking at. As you can see, it's not bad, especially the companies on the left-hand side, but companies on the right-hand side have to work, have more work to do. So what I was trying to say is we do have a long journey ahead. 99% of these companies, 2030 near term and science-based protocols, they are following them. In 2030, they have to make a major progress, and 2050, for 2050, 90% have the goal of being zero carbon zero. TC Energy has chosen 2040. Usually others have 2050. As I said, they have a long journey all the way to zero. So after looking at this table, I will go back. I talked about certain contracts and certain methods, and I'd like to talk about them, what is being done, and how companies are creating financing for themselves, or how are they programming their products and services for the future. When we look at asset management, what is asset management in general? Electricity services, critical maintenance, following up, and managing some variables like maintenance. This is what we're trying to do with asset management. As you do this, of course, there are two questions that is asked by sustainability. As you're carrying out the maintenance, how are you preparing yourself financially? And secondly, how are you able to use this as financing for yourself? Yes, there's an amount that you're supposed to spend like CAPEX or OPEX as a company, but are you able to monetize this? Are you able to create a green financing environment for yourself? This is what they're trying to answer. And for this, in a simple way, software as a service contracts are used. Many energy companies have developed this idea. They said we can apply this in the same format. We can sell this to companies and create green financing for ourselves. What does this mean? I'm sure we all know, but just to refresh our memories, software as a service means a software, rather than being installed on individual computers, and a subscription system is created, and it runs online, and it is licensed to users, and we make payments to the company which we supply it from. Energy, I'd like to talk about sustainable energy services. What are they and how do they function, and how do power generation companies do this? In addition to generating power, if they're also doing supply, this has become a very common method, and I try to give some examples. For instance, there's a link that we see here. For those of you who are interested, you can visit and see Schneider Energy, for instance. The energy companies in the table that I've just showed you, 90% are applying such services. What they do is, as I said, when it comes to energy and sustainable energy adjustment, they sometimes work themselves or work with a subcontractor to create a software sustainable in sustainable energy or energy services. This, in addition to energy sales, it helps in energy saving to companies or countries. They sell the subscription of this. For instance, a supplying company goes to an energy production company and says, I'm buying energy from you, which is great. But in addition to this, I will like to also purchase your energy saving software. And only if there are savings, they make the payment for you. This is great for the buying company and the selling company. This is a win-win because the seller or the energy generator has all the rights in the system. For instance, installing panels on certain parts of the company, on the rooftop, let's say, or at any location. The owner is the energy production company. On the other hand, they sell subscription as well. And as a result of the savings, a certain percentage commission is calculated and is paid to the seller, and the buyer does not have to spend any capital or in green finance. This has become a great model that we really like, and you can declare this as extra balance sheet at the beginning or in reaching the services and developing technology. This is the buyer want. This has to be set in a certain language, in a clear language. Some companies, for instance, want solar panels, or some companies want to spread it further, especially to sustainable, and the bulbs that they use or the recycling that they do, they want you to deal with all these elements. And this is between the producer and the buyer, and depends on the agreement between them. So in general, let's see what has happened in a brief summary. With that, I will wrap up my speech. Energy markets are very volatile. We have very fluctuating conditions, especially recently. The energy-based wars or the increase in overall prices, these will continue. We are going through unknowns. On a macro level, the markets don't see great, but these are also times of great opportunities. Renewable energy indeed is becoming ever more important. And as we do this on-site, off-site PPA, or in general, how to sell or how to supply becomes significant. To give you an example, for instance, through some company names, Coca-Cola, last month they wanted to conduct a research in Turkey. In what way is energy supplied for the factories that they own here on site? Is a very common method. Off-site is about procuring from the producer, Secondly, energy contracts or PPAs. Yes, these are popular. Unfortunately, virtual PPAs do not exist in Turkey yet. In Europe, US, and some South American companies. VPPN has a nice aspect. You don't have to make any infrastructure investment. In virtual, you deal with the financing and you don't care where the infrastructure come from, as opposed to a normal power purchase agreement. These are becoming more popular. Why? Because I just talked about sustainability, if you remember, and I am talking about Coca-Cola. They want to understand, and as I understand, RECs or IRECs, maybe things that are familiar with, they want to see it internationally valid energy certificates, whether they exist in Turkey or not, and what are the classifications. They want to see it as well. So as a result, in Turkey, they see that on-site energy procurement is the best method. As they do the contracts, or if we go back to the beginning, what do they want to do in sustainability? I will go back a little bit. As a company, in your sustainability efforts, what you should do first is to measure your carbon emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. You have to see it first. Usually, scope 1, scope 2, these are own used by the company, or emissions changing depending on the electricity that they use. The third scope is divided into 15 categories, and with different suppliers. This covers different suppliers or external factors. You have to look at it as your company, whether you are a power producer or any other company. These are typical steps. And if you would like to decrease your energy usage, there are some rules that you have to follow as a betterment. These are MAC curve. We would like to see these. The protocols want to see it as well. How much do you decrease and where? And based on what? What are your financials in these exactly? You have to really put this in place. And as you do this, as I have said before, energy contracts, virtual PPMs, PPAs, these are immediately in play. This is good news in scope 2. This is used a lot as a method. As an energy producer, you have great advantages here. In addition, for energy savings or decreasing carbon emissions, there are other steps that you can see which have to be displayed on the curves according to the protocols. After that, which frame do you want to follow? Scientific, science-based, or nature-based? You have to make the decision and take the approval. And I can tell you, every month, on average, 300 companies all over the world set the science-based goals and apply for it. In the past, the waiting time was a month and a half, and now it takes 6 to 7 months, and receiving the result may take 1 to 2 years, and big changes do happen in the meantime. If you're a power generation company, there are different categories, or based on what area you are working in. So the protocols, the frames, the roadmap that you have creates a big difference as a company, as a community, including employees, energy, social, and governance, ESG angles. In these, making a decision together, we should make a decision, you should make a decision together and go towards goals. TCF, climate change based challenge calculation. These may change from country to country, or from geography to geography, region to region. These are decided by the management, and in sustainability, these create good results. Still, the companies in the US are working hard on it, but 70 or 80% of them do not know where to begin. European countries are more ahead in this regard, especially energy companies, when it comes to sustainability. But despite this, they continue working. Work continues. In addition, in order to generate green finance, every method is being tried. Support is taken from governments they're trying to create their own like energy companies and energy production companies, I should underline, both in energy and sustainability have a gold value. They have the position with the golden key, and over the next years, in the next 5 years, much more busy work will be needed in energy markets. Probably I have to stop here. Thank you.
Çok teşekkür ederiz. Olivia Mansakola gerçekten çok kritik noktalara değindi. Çok güzel özetledi bizim için. Karbon nötr olmakla net zero
Thank you
olmak.
very much. We have listened to the difference between carbon neutral and net zero. They may, as concepts, be mixed up. It should be cheap, it should be safe, and it should be affordable. And she also touched upon the importance of supply chain. We also have a session on that. We attach great importance to that. Of course, when we say sustainable, we should not leave anyone or anything behind, but if there are things that are left behind from the supply chain, we will of course discuss that. Now we'll break for 15 minutes and then we'll continue with the next panel discussion.
Evet, tekrar merhaba.
Welcome back. Our conference is to continue with yet another interesting panel discussion, finance, investment, and supply solutions in the green energy transformation. We will discuss this. When we think about renewable energy, the current situation has to be discussed in Turkey, so this has to be discussed first. We have prominent panelists with us. We will be discussing the impact of this transformation on the market and supplier relationship. What kind of issues are encountered by investment companies? Improvement areas, of course, there's always room for improvement. And green energy transformation is something we all desire, but of course, it takes some financing. What are these financing tools? These will be handled. Our panelists and speakers have taken their seats. We have IICC Director from Sabancı University, Bora Şekip Güray. He is going to be moderating this session. Egemen Yamankurt from Enerjisa Production. From Enercon, we have Arif Günyar, who is the CEO for Central Asia, Middle East, and Africa, and Serkan Duruduygu from Akbank, Department of Investment Banking. Thank you very much. Have an enjoyable panel discussion. Today, this is the fifth session for today. I'd like to start off by thanking each and every one of you. We have a big crowd here in the room, and we have attendees, online attendees as well. Enerjisa, of course, we have to thank Enerjisa for bringing together such prominent speakers and panelists. Without further ado, we'll start with our panel discussion. We have three panelists. We will discuss supply and especially wind turbine supply, investors and investment and banking. Arif Bey from Enercon, Serkan Bey from Akbank, and Egemen Bey from Enerjisa. Let's start with you. How are we? Let me hear from you the investor's perspective. What is the potential? Are we able to utilize our potential as investors? What are your bottlenecks and your challenges? And in order to overcome these challenges, what kind of solutions or suggestions can you bring? Thank you. I also would like to start by thanking you. Although this is the fifth session, we have a great audience. It's great to see that. Well, when we consider investment in the last 10 years for wind turbines, initial investment cost has come down remarkably. This is excluding the last 2 years. For the last 2 years, because of the conjunctural reasons, of course, we have had some changes, but as you consider the last decade, the trend is going backward or downward. Actually, the capex cost has come down, and this has contributed to investments. Investments have become more profitable and meaningful. And with the green transformation encountered in different parts of the world, this has brought together these green transformation with the investors. These are the positive sides. Along with this, we still have ambiguity and we still have high level of ambiguity when it comes to foreseeability. This actually intimidates investors and from time to time brings along hesitation, and investors go through significant reflection and significant consideration. There are so many things to do because the biggest hurdle standing against investment is ambiguity. Making investments in an ambiguous world is more meaningful. I also would like to share another perspective. Thinking about an average project, power station investment, it actually takes 5 to 7 years for ROI. Believe me, only 1 year is construction. Other than that, the following process is spent with official permits and relevant documentation and requirements. In the past, for impact analysis, environmental impact analysis, unfortunately, with the new request, this has come up to 1 year, although it used to take 3-4 months only. So inter-organizational communication and talks play a significant role, because if the process is facilitated and if this process is shortened, it's going to be extremely beneficial for our country and sectors. In the upcoming term, I would say that we have to focus on 3 basic points, especially to make a difference. If we are willing to make a difference and would like to put ourselves to the forefront, we have to ensure that there is a change of mechanism, formation of mechanism and change of mechanism. When I say mechanism, I refer to the escalation methodology and pricing methodology. We have to create a stock of projects. And as I've said before, when it comes to permits, we have to have collaboration among the public offices. Thank you. Market investor, any investor who'd like to enhance or grow his portfolio has to consider this. So there should be partnership between private-public partnership, and there should also be reflections on renewable energy investments. Special models have to be prepared, so that there is need for further consideration. So if we are to continue with you, Arif Bey, turbine investments are on the rise. We have heard that the potential is 100 gigawatts. With the offshore, this can come up to 150 gigawatts, and installed capacity is 12 gigawatts. So it's like 1/12 of the whole potential. So if we accelerate the process, we may multiply this 5 or 6 times. Turkey has the potential to do so, and turbine technologies will be supporting that, because we will then be able to get more output and we'll also have operational benefits. How do you see that? And we are talking about green transformation. How can turbine technology support the green transformation, and how can this become a part of the company targets? Let's hear all of those from you. Thank you very much. I also would like to thank Enerjisa production for this important conference. Hopefully it's going to be productive for us all. Thank you for your participation as well. Actually, if I take you 2 steps backwards and present you a wide perspective, what has happened in the last 2-3 years, especially during the pandemic? Industry and production, manufacturing industries, in order to ensure sustainability, automation has been accelerating and has been developing. And this actually put forward digitalization and use of power. And at the same time, as a measure to protect nature and continue with climate action, net zero concept has been a trendy topic, and as you know, the Paris Agreement has once again been emphasized. With this environmental change, both in industry and transportation, power is emphasized as the main source, especially use of EV is going to be extended in the future, and most probably in the next decade or so, it is going to become a conventional method of transportation. And we know of the investments made in Turkey along with TOG. So when it comes to green energy, of course, the resource of that has to be renewable. In addition to all these developments, during this year, there is this, as a part of the development this year, unfortunately, there is this war that broke, and energy resources, access to energy resources has become challenged, and to keep dependency at a minimum level and to ensure that energy prices or electricity prices are retained or reduced. All energy policies are revisited and are all rehandled. It's as if the cards are distributed all over again. So when we put all of this on top of one another, the use of power as a resource is inevitable. It's a fact of life, and this is being emphasized. And we have on our agenda green hydrogen generation or integration of green hydrogen into our life, storage, hybrid systems. Along with these, we will be using energy resources, renewable energy resources more efficiently. We will integrate them more to our lives, and from now on, renewable energy will become a conventional energy resource. We see that steps are taken in that respect, especially in Turkey. And here we have especially a tendency to make sure that everything is in harmony with nature, and wind energy is what we believe to be the most efficient one. So wind energy is more on the forefront, and as turbine producers, in order to use this domain more efficiently, turbine sizes are enhanced, and with more and more large turbines, we are trying to optimize this market. It is an aggressive market, the turbine market right now. Even in the automotive industry, new models are launched when it comes to automobiles. However, in our market, our investors, from their perspective, in order to ensure that the investment is feasible and in order to ensure that it is efficient, new turbine models are expected. And we try our best we are asked to design new turbines. It's as if we are selling houses with some model housing. We're like contractors selling apartments from the model. It is challenging for us to come up with new designs, and we are doing our best to catch up with that trend. And it is valid for the whole turbine industry. And at the same time, we have 4 gigawatts, 5 gigawatts of installed capacity. When you start with 1 or 2 megawatts, 1,000, 2,000, or maybe 4,000, 2,000 turbines have to be manufactured a year. Currently, turbine purchasing, when the turbine power reaches 6 megawatts, your annual production is left at the level of 700, 800. So for the supply chain and for the sake of reducing costs and keeping the manufacturing lines alive, you need to spend a special effort. It brings along an issue. And of course, at the same time, although the turbine sizes have grown bigger, their delivery to the field is an issue, especially 175 meters of diameter is hard to be transported to the field, especially in countries like Turkey where there are hills and mountains. So for us, this is a challenge, and it's actually is going to be a new term, a new era for us. So in the upcoming term, we will have more installed capacity, more efficient use of spaces. I'm going to touch upon that with your permission during the second round. Repower is going to be introduced to the Turkish market rather soon. I will ask this to Egemen Bey as well, because I suppose Enerjisa has such power stations as well. Serkan Bey, I will now come to you. Without financing, of course, none of these projects would be a reality. So there are many models that have been tried in Turkey. Some have been quite efficient as far as I can see. Or for some others, YEKDEM, YEKA did not help much to enhance capacity. So can we hear from you how you see these developments? And from now on, what would you say about the appetite for the future, both at Akbank and at other financial institutions? How is the appetite like at Akbank and at other financial institutions? Thank you, Bora Bey. Let me first of all say the following. Addressing such a prominent audience is indeed thrilling. We have such well-equipped participants here. Let me first of all touch upon the infrastructure of it. So far, we have provided support to renewables, and I'm going to touch upon that first, and then I will tie it to what you asked about. Finance models are used for renewables. It takes long-term credit. And we, under the name of project financing, investment banking, 4,750 megawatt capacity of projects have been supported by us. $3 billion of loan we have offered, approximately that's the amount. Since 2016, we are offering loans only to renewable energy when it comes to energy sector, and active loan, 83% of the active loans are renewables, are for renewables. And in 2021, new coal power station financing, we have declared that we will not be involved in any coal plant financing, and we have written that in our environmental protocols and rules. We are the first bank declaring that. And by 2050, Akbank has the commitment to ensure net zero emission. What does that mean? It's not only the operations of the bank, but also the loan portfolio, credit portfolio that will have net zero. And having net zero for a bank is forming a big part of the operation. So that means that carbon intense sectors, we will follow up more closely. Green loans will be promoted more, and the weight of the green loans will be more in the upcoming days to come. And we will continue with our commitment for renewable energy. This is important in the following respect. Energy investments are necessary for supply security, but renewable energy loans have a deeper mission. It actually reduces dependency on external sources, and it contributes to the green economy. These projects are more on the forefront for green economy. So for the next 5 to 7 years, I would say that 50 gigawatts is the requirement for future investment. And 35, 40 gigawatts of that will come from renewable energy. So these renewable energy investments have to be financed across years so that Turkey is less dependent on external sources. Turkey ensures green transformation and supply security. For that, these loans, these credits, we have to have policies to ensure that. I can openly state it that dollar-based YEKDEM model, which was in place until June 2021, half of the installed capacity is renewable energy. Actually, it is thanks to this policy, dollar-based YEKDEM. I also hear some criticism about this dollar-based YEKDEM is a load on the system, some say, but with the right calculation, renewable energy projects are lowering the market electricity prices. Everyone who has sufficient data may make that calculation. So we as Akbank think that in the upcoming term for 35-40 megawatts, if we are discussing this renewable energy project and if we are discussing the bankability of this, we need policies to support that. I'm going to give a brief example. I don't want to take too much of your time. The YEKDEM policy, the current YEKDEM policy, with the capacity efficiency, with the credit pricing, a wind or a solar project requires 40 to 50% equity from the investors. This actually has a big impact on the investors, and investors with no strong capital. This is restrictive. It restricts access to credit. 85 to 15, 25, 75. We were able to finance such projects with these percentages. So this has come up to 50 or 60% for investors, and energy prices, it's known by everyone. With the current, on the current arrangements, there may be some caps to be placed so that these projects are more financeable. Investors are able to see what's ahead of them, and with renewable energy projects, we will be less dependent.
Finansmana erişim zorlukları bir yana, şu an hibrit projeler ve kapasite artış projeleri.
Putting aside challenges, the capacity increase projects are still feasible, and banks and investors are dwelling on it because they are creating operational capital, and these are capacity increases based on existing projects. For that reason, the banks have the appetite and investors are able to access capital more easily. Thank you very much, Serkan Bey. Maybe as you have said, there are different models. I believe carbon markets may come to the agenda in Turkey soon, and with those fossil fuels, the competition between fossil fuels and renewables could be carried to a different platform. With that, new opportunities can be created, and the YETA model, especially in mature markets where renewable energy source share is higher compared to Turkey, and fossils do not set the price. And I see this as a win-win model as well, because on the one hand, it's an income foreseeability for the producer and supply security linked to a contract. It also helps decrease the carbon footprint, especially for iron, steel, cement, and textile industries of Turkey, where there's a lot of exports to Europe. On the other hand, Arif Günyar, I told you I would ask in the first round, turbines, what's the inventory in Turkey? I don't know, I'm curious. What is the average age in Turkey compared to Europe? How do we fare? I believe we must have a younger fleet, but I guess we will reach that as well. The economic lifespan, is it technical or economic? That's beyond me, so I'd like to find out about it. What are we supposed to do? Are we in need of a new legislation or any new financing? Probably next 5 to 10 years, we will have to deal with this, so let's hear from you. Thank you very much. Yes, financing and investments. Probably my colleagues will have to, co-panelists will have to answer it, but I can answer from a more technical standpoint. The turbines, probably, their commercial shelf life, there are type certificates, and the type certificate is usually setting the commercial life, or sets the duration of this trade, which is usually 20 to 25 years. The turbines 10 years ago have a lifespan of 20 years. Now it is 25 years. It can reach 30 years as well. For instance, we can see life cycles similar to the flight industry, aerospace industry. This is the commercial aspect, but technically there's a dilemma as well, because on the one hand, talking about Turkey, for instance, the first wind for instance, Enercon turbines, 500 kilowatts, operational since 1998 and still generating power. And they have been working for more than 20 years and generating power. On the other hand, there are turbines that are not working or generating power. We have to divide it into two. As the turbine producers, what kind of a solution can we create out of this? 15 years we offer availability guarantees and maintenance service. We offer such concepts to our customers, and we look at the situation of the turbine, and if the customer wants to operate and continue, we offer the service. We can extend the service for 5 years and even longer, and no problem with extending it. And we have done it in Turkey. On the other hand, the service, in addition to the service contract, maybe not in Turkey, but in Europe, PPA style bilateral agreements help expand that package so that our investor can extend for 5 to 10 more years, and we help them operate the turbine and increase the life cycle in a commercial way. Another solution is repowering. Right now, it's not used a lot in Turkey because of the reason you have mentioned. In terms of the age average of our turbines, it's not a hot topic in Turkey yet, but my personal opinion is that after 2025, we will start discussing such topics, and probably we will see after 2028 that it is more common in the market, and it will become an important agenda item in Turkey as well. The reason why I'm saying this is that after 15 years, this topic usually comes up more. So the installed capacity in Turkey was 3 gigawatts in 2010 or 15, let's say, increased to 9 in 2020. So within this time frame, when will repowering, we can imagine that repowering will come to the agenda. Repowering, of course, as a turbine manufacturer, of course, we're always behind it, but as an investor, or for the energy supply of a country, it's an important advantage as well, because in Turkey, as you know, production licenses are 25 to 49 years. So in these 25 to 49 years, 2 times or 3 times, you can operate your, keep your project in operation. So in this regard, this is an important advantage. On the other hand, in existing projects, if the primary reason is service, maintenance, or when you cannot take a service about supply parts or service or maintenance. In my previous talk, I said the product portfolio changes very rapidly, which means 5 years later, the turbine may no longer be in serial production, which may cause problems about spare parts. So repowering can be an important topic 15 to 20 years later. In this regard, one of the main reasons of this is one of the reasons for repowering. Another main reason is that if in your space, if you're able to increase the electricity power, in order to increase your electricity power in the same space, this is a great method because it can increase up to 6 times or 10 times within the same amount of space. You are able to increase the installed capacity of your project. For instance, in 1998, the project that became operational in 98 was a 1.5 megawatt. When you use the same location in 2024-25, you can use a 6 megawatt turbine. It will make it 5 times. It will help it generate 5 times as much electricity in the same space. This is good for the country as well. It can help with the gap in energy supply, and it's more environmentally friendly as well, because you're using the existing field. You don't have to build roads again or cut down trees again. And you can increase the capacity of the existing project up to 10 times even. You can increase the power up to 10 times, and you can get a much better project compared to the existing one. In 2013 and 14, there was a 3 megawatt cumulative power in Turkey. When you repower that, you can increase it fivefold, and in 2028 or 2030, the new capacity will be 5 times more. The government doesn't have to issue new licenses. We reproject, and if we do the capacities better in the transmission line without any further damage on the nature from existing projects, 20 or 30 gigawatts can be obtained from existing facilities. So 10 years later, repowering can become a very important industry, especially for the country and for the nature. There's also the bank and investment aspect of it as well, because an existing project, you are using an existing project or an existing infrastructure, and it will make it more feasible, and you have an ongoing system there already. So when we put together all of these, especially, my guess is that after 2028 or 2030, repowering will become important in Turkey. And for that, investors, banks, and maybe more importantly, lawmakers, regulators will have to prepare, because there's no legislation on it yet. How will the trade will happen? How will the licenses be? Will there be capacity increase, or will we remain at the same power in the same space? Many questions are not answered in legislation. The legislation will have to prepare for it. I think we have to start preparing. Time has come to prepare for this because of the reasons that I've listed. On the other hand, in legislation, as we discussed repowering, we have to work on bringing new technologies to Turkey. As turbine producers, I'm excited to bring the best models, best prototypes to Turkey, but we don't have legislation here either. For prototype, there is no infrastructure, and for that we have to work again. So technology provider, investor, financier, and government authorities have to meet and create infrastructure for the change. Egehan Bey, do you have anything to add to the repowering topic or on the wind capacity, how to increase the capacity in the portfolio based on what Arif Bey has said? Do you have any additions to make? I agree with everything Arif Bey has said. As both speakers said, our main need is a roadmap to have a capacity projection for the long run. Where do we want to go, and what kind of a capacity would we have, and where? In new power plants, in the existing ones? Do we increase capacity, or do we tender out in a transparent way and clear way? This should be shared, and in terms of financing, the mechanism should be bankable as well. And legislation and permits should be within that scope as well, so that a capacity should not be inert for long years. They should turn into power plants, and we should decrease our foreign dependency, and so that we can generate more power from renewable resources. Energy perspective on reprojection, we are looking into it. It's a bit early to do that yet, but as Arif Günger said, there's a significant opportunity. But for that, we need a legislative change, because with the current legislation, I believe that the current legislation do not prevent you from repowering, but repowering means taking an existing turbine and modifying it a bit with the same capacity. You cannot increase the capacity, but actually, as a field, some have proven themselves, and many important construction costs have already been paid, have already incurred, and everything has already been put in place. So economically speaking, this could bring maximum benefit to the country. In repowering, Enerjisa generation, as long as it's financially irrelevant, will do this, because in the journey of Enerjisa production in renewable power plants, the generation in renewable power plants will be increased. We have seen some exciting news this year in renewable energy and other projects. We have used our time very efficiently so far, and the last words, Serkan Duru Duygu, 7 minutes. You mentioned that in the first round, the ESG is a very popular topic these days. We're all trying to understand it better. How does the bank see this? You have mentioned a couple points, but how does renewable stand here? ESG for the whole ecosystem and for all stakeholders is bringing added value. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I'm very happy to answer this question, because every time we meet with investors as a bank, every time we go abroad, sustainability is a popular topic. This question is always asked, and it is beyond awareness now. They're expecting concrete steps. They're asking us what we have done. They always ask this question, and I would like to make a distinction here. A bank, a green loan, a social loan, when a loan is classified this way, how does the bank do this, or how should it be done? This is an important topic. If the bank is extending a loan or issuing bonds, which they want to classify as green, first of all, it has to have its own sustainable financing frame. What is this frame? In order to classify a loan as green or social, there has to be a list of criteria. Not every loan is green, or not every loan is social. There's a list of strict criteria, which of course, based on the market conditions of the country, is run by a certain international criteria. You do not set this criteria yourself. When you have this sustainable finance frame and you set your criteria, that's not enough. You have to take the opinion of an independent auditor. If your sustainable financing frame is too broad, or it does not have enough concrete steps, you run the risk of not taking a positive return from this financier, or even if you do, you may face the risk of greenwashing allegations, which is a big reputational risk for a bank in the future, which means not every loan can be a social or a green loan, and banks have to analyze very carefully and set a careful criteria. Otherwise, banks who don't do this suffer about this in the future. So we as Akbank look at our sustainable finance frame, and we set according to these rules, and we keep updating it in a very broad scale, from energy efficiency to green energy or sustainable water management to waste water management to green vehicles to circular economy. In this broad range, we provide loans, green loans. We also have microfinancing, employment, unemployment, etc. loans in a broad range. Not every loan to the renewable industry is a green loan. For instance, you may have financed a hydro power plant, but there are strict criteria in the framework which dictates whether it's green or not. Or if you have made an energy efficiency, there is at least a 15% criteria, let's say 15% energy savings, or for green vehicles, there are emission thresholds. Thanks to such thresholds, we can measure for what purpose the investment is used and measure the positive impact. Maybe this is the most important aspect, the impact reporting. When we extend green loans, we should be able to measure their green impact. We do this for our own portfolio, which enables us a faster shifting to low carbon economy, and it can encourage many investors to invest in green areas, and it paves the way for more ambitious investment. In that regard, even in a roof transition, we do not only decrease the energy bill, but we do also take down the footprint, carbon footprint, and contribute to green cycle. So this contribute, all of these investments contribute to Turkey's net zero goal, and they're important investment. Yes, just like you said, the clean transition, green transition, consumer costs, and on a macro level, Turkey's bill, energy bill, as we all know, a record will come. It could be about $100 billion. The average over the past few years was 30 or 40, so this will be at least twice more, excluding, of course, the increase in the exchange rate. And the current deficit would not be without energy import. So the energy import increases the current gap, and if we do less, the money stays in the country, and the money that we spend for importing, we could keep it inside, and we could use it for wind or solar projects, as Serkan Bey said, for electric transport, circular economy, waste management. We can use the funds for such opportunities and generate more value out of this. This brings us to the end of our time. I would like to thank all of you for being here, and I'd like to give a round of applause to our speakers.
Teşekkür ederiz Serkan Bey, Arif Bey, Egemen Bey, Bora Bey, çok teşekkür
Thank you very much to all of our speakers, Bora, Egemen, Arif, and Serkan. I have taken down some notes. Our roadmap is critical, solid steps, and measuring our impact is important. Repowering is something that I take from here as well. But for that, we're of course anticipating legislative changes. Thank you. We will have a 15-minute break, then meet at the last panel of the day to talk about
Evet, günün son panelinden
Yes, this is the final panel discussion of today. We are going to discuss supply chain. We had already said so. And as many other participants mentioned, supply chain is extremely important and supply chain has to be managed with sustainability in mind. We have a team panelists with us to discuss this matter, and we are going to be discussing purchasing, procurement, and supply chain. Welcome. We have Enerjisa Purchasing Director Aziz Ünal, who is going to moderate this session. We have Emek Gökaya from Enercon, Global Purchasing Director, Ersan Meriç, who is the CPO of Sun Express, and from Bosch, we have Ersin Öztürk, who is the Vice President in charge of logistics, digital transformation, and sustainability. Have an enjoyable session. Thank you. I have three words of thanks to make before we proceed. I would first of all like to thank you all for participating and being with us. And I also would like to thank you for being with us because the year is extremely painful for purchasing department. We know that. So I'd like to thank you for accepting our invitation and being with us. I'm looking forward to hearing from you so that we learn more from you. And your experience. And thirdly, I would like to extend my thanks to the organizers. This is an extremely enjoyable event, corporate communications and asset management department. I would like to extend my thanks to both departments and everyone else who contributed. Sustainability is extremely important. We know that already. We've been discussing that since from the morning. We know that this is very important. It plays a very important role. And sustainability is key for companies, and it is at such a level that, in addition to the financials, sustainability approaches and targets are checked more and looked more into as an investment is to be made. So in order for companies to meet their sustainability targets, of course, supply chain plays an important role. There's so much to do. Many people rolled the ball to us. Ms. Olivia talked about the sensitivity related to supply chain and purchasing. So especially in the morning session, this was mentioned, net zero target for 2050 within this framework. Companies have roadmaps, they're working on it. And maybe initially we may start with your company's target within the framework of net zero emission. What is the approach of your company and your supply chain departments? Let's start with your roadmap. Let's start with you. With your permission, I will start. Aziz Bey, thank you very much. We are here since from the morning. I'm coming from Bursa, from Bosch company. It is so great to see so many stakeholders. This was mentioned previously as well. We are here for a 2-day conference on sustainability. I would like to congratulate Enerjisa for organizing this for the second time. The content is great. I've been watching them all. Since from the morning session, we've been producing technology for life as Bosch for the last 136 years. And while doing that, sustainability is always on the forefront. If I'm to briefly mention, as Bosch company, of course, we are in favor of Paris Agreement, etc., etc., but contributing to life is our vision. We have our net zero targets, including top 3. By the year 2030, including the top 3, we will have reduced our carbon emission by 15%. 400,000 people in our team we have, and we are known with our white goods. Only 25% is composed of white goods, but 60% of Bosch is for the automotive industry. So this is quite a challenging target because energy is used mostly in this area, and this is one of the areas where energy is discussed most intensively. So at more than 400 Bosch locations, we have set this as a target. So what are we doing as of 2021, as of 2022, we are talking about net zero and carbon emission reduction. Including Bosch Bursa factory, we have become carbon neutral as of 2021. We generate green energy, we use green energy, and this is at an extent of 93%, and the remaining 7% we have offset. This is for Scope 1 and Scope 3. Scope 3 is extremely challenging. Why? Because it might be the case for your products, or it may be the case for companies producing products. 90% of Scope 3 is related to the life cycle and the carbon emission that is produced throughout the life cycle. So I'm going to divide this into three before I complete this round. In order to produce less carbon, we are transforming our products, and within our own process, as you also do at your own companies, we make optimizations in order to reduce our carbon footprint. And finally, in the supply chain, of course, Scope 3 is of critical importance. Wherever we have our products or services, wherever we are delivering it to, carbon footprint is key, and this is among our net targets in order to ensure that carbon footprint is reduced. So I will continue touching upon the details, but now I'd like to hand it over to Ersan Bey. Aziz Bey, as you have also mentioned, by the year 2050, net zero will be key. For SunExpress, it is a regulation, it's an obligation for us. It seems like a target set forward, but for airline companies, this is actually highly regulated. I mean, our sector is highly regulated, and it is not till 2050. We have certain targets for 2025, 2030, etc., etc. We have some milestones in between until 2050, and the content is defined. It has a specific framework. So what we do is we work in this regard, and we work in line with the regulations we are subject to. Of course, different from other companies, we provide services. Airline companies provide services and sell services. And as we produce this service, we create some emission, and this emission is, among all the emission sources, one of the largest. And let me give the following example. Around the world, the emission created by all flights, when compared with other sectors, it is way more. And among them, or as you break down, you see that 77% is long-haul flights. 77% long-haul flights, 23% short-haul flights.
Baktığınızda ise durum tam tersi. Yani uzun mesafe
Numerically, it's different. Long-haul flights form only 20% of the total flights. So there seems to be this proportionate thing. You can see the reasons apparently. For the aviation sector, we don't have any solution addressed for the aviation sector, but we have sustainable aviation fuel. We call it SAF. This is used in certain areas, but basically three main areas. We have three main working areas. We have synthetic fuel work. We have another study for biofuel, and we also have another attempt to produce fuel from hydrogen cells. All these three are to serve for the purpose of fulfilling those targets. However, apparently, these attempts are not sufficient. At this point in time, the synthetic fuel production capacity is known. Bio is not scalable, and for hydrogen, when you use hydrogen, especially for long-haul flights, as you know, I said emissions are higher for long-haul flights. If you'd like to cover this with hydrogen cells, the weight you will place on the aircraft will be mainly the cells, not the passengers. So the sector doesn't seem to have a tailor-made solution. but there's tremendous attempts to develop a solution. Basically, as we consider the situation, it's not only our company, but as a sector, we are confronted with these targets, but hardly any solution. We do not seem to have a solution yet. This is the current situation. Emek Bey, I'm not coming from Bursa. I come from 2 kilometers away. I came all the way from Antalya.
En geç de en yakın gelirmiş.
So I'm the lucky one, and the one who lives close comes the last. So we as Enercon work in the area of green energy. We contribute to sustainable energy for the world is the motto of our founder, and on various platforms we try to develop certain product portfolios so that we may contribute more to sustainability. We continue to work on this. As Enercon, we have 6,000 suppliers. 90% of them are in Europe and Africa, 10% in Asia Pacific, and 1% in America. That's how we have our suppliers. As our materials are supplied, sustainability and sustainable processes are handled, and we aim to continue with these processes. And we try to apply all the principles in our sector. We work in close collaboration with various institutions. Wind energy is one. Global Energy Council, that's world known, Wind Europe and Wind Council Europe. One of our mottos is 3P. That's our approach: planet, people, product. 3Ps: our world, our products, and our environment. And in light of this all, we try to emphasize their contribution to sustainability. Purchasing is, of course, at the core of it. But before we make it to purchasing, I'm sure we are going to go into that. Product portfolio, design of products, all of these are critical because sustainable products are playing a key role in ensuring sustainability. So on a production base, within a production-based approach, we have to design our products accordingly so that sustainability and carbon emission are on our focus as we produce. As a result of the work we conducted, the concrete towers are no longer used, which we used to have. So for these towers, cement and water used to be utilized, but that's no longer the case. Another R&D activity that we have is the climbing crane. Climbing crane is the crane or the tower of the turbine, as this is being mounted without the need to rent a crane. All the parts of the tower are automatically mounted. So as a crane is used, there is harm on the ground. So we no longer use those cranes, and we reduce that impact. And the crane capacity for higher levels, transfer of those cranes from point A to point B is thus prevented, and thus we contribute to the reduction of carbon emissions. Especially our turbine technology requires direct drive. It's the technology that we have. So in case of maintenance, oil or grease is used. The amount of grease used when compared with other OEMs, we see that it's at a minimum level, and that contributes immensely to sustainability. Thank you very much. As the distinguished speakers mentioned, supply management is extremely important to fulfill companies' target for sustainability. In order to write success stories that are great opportunities, as these success stories are written, suppliers have to be with us as important players. This was mentioned many times in the morning session and in the afternoon session, the significance of suppliers. Personally speaking, I'm wondering the following, and I'd like to hear from you what your experience is. How are you attracting your suppliers to this game? How do you create awareness among them? Let me start with you, Ersan Bey. Well, let me put it this way. As I said, there are no clear solutions. So on the one hand, we have to create suppliers, and we have to have reverse marketing. We are actually well, there is going to be a future for something which is not produced currently, and we will continue from there. But in response to the question you posed, I'm going to say the following. This is for the whole company of ours. Among all our activities, this is not directly supported because companies are established, companies are for profit. The organizations are for profit. They would like to grow and be profitable. And there's a management which does that, which ensures that for the shareholders, and they come up with targets for this year, for the following year. So we will either have higher costs or we will give up on more profit. So as we work with suppliers, as much as suppliers, we would like to be a missionary. We would act like missionaries for this. Be it for sustainability and environment, it could be for SAFs. So all of these, both internally and externally, require an effort. And yes, we think that the society is a stakeholder, and for the sake of the stakeholder, I am going to be delivering a sustainable solution, be it a product or service. But then again, the same society would like to consume, and while consuming, the society wants to have less cost. So there are different interests, and this requires a conflict management. So high cost to be reduced and environmental impact to be reduced. So targets and aspirations are in a way conflicting with one another, and we are dancing among them. Sustainability and sustainable aviation fuel, SAF. Dear friends, SAF is having a contribution of 1 or 2% maximum. So only some of the flights, for some of the flights and for some of the, for only 1 or 2% of the total fuel. And the price is 5 times more than jet fuel. And that's why they don't add more. And the capacity is not sufficient. That's another reason behind it. But sustainable aviation fuel, let's say I found it, I have suppliers. If I am to use this 100% on all my flights, then the financials of the company will be upside down. So I'm going to do something environmental, but the company will be at a loss. So there needs to be some balance there. So with the suppliers, what we do is we have R&D, and while doing that, we have to ensure a balance between the company and the shareholders and stakeholders. This is quite a sensitive balance. I focus on this too much because from the, when you take it from the total size, the impact we create is larger. We have approximately 3,500, 4,000 crew members, and for their transport, we have private cars carrying them in 3s or 4s. We provide services for 3 or 4. We have made some preparations for these transport vehicles. 25% of these vehicles will be EV, and then gradually we will proceed with more. So as suppliers, without increasing costs, we'd like to do this. We said we'd like to have such a transition to electrical vehicles, and we've been able to do that. So from the supplier's perspective, of course, they have to be convinced. It is rather rare that you say, I found this environmentalist thing, let's do it, and everyone jumps into it. You have to have reverse marketing. So there are these things. Thank you. Emek Bey? As Enercon, of course, our suppliers' contribution to sustainability, we have established a system, internal system, and within this internal system, our suppliers have made some commitments, and we monitor to see their fulfillment. Ethical values and code of conduct are assigned by our suppliers, and among these ethical values, we have prevention of abuse, child labor, conflict of interest. These are among the basic principles. And afterwards, we have preliminary qualification for our suppliers. We go to their places, we verify the declarations they make. We have continuous audits, we have some field visits. This issue has to be systematically handled, and with collaboration, we work with our suppliers. We try to develop materials and supplies. We collaborate with R&D department. The wind turbines have the recycling of the blades. You might have heard that the blades are more challenging to be recycled, and rather recently in an R&D activity, a certain resin is used in order to recycle these blades, and handling of these blades with fiber. There are some R&D activities for that, and we continue with our suppliers to work on this. I can also talk on behalf of my company in the following sense. Let me tell you what we do as Bosch in the automotive sector. It's not only for the sake of sustainability; it's important in other respects. In other aspects as well. It's even more important these days. At the panel discussions I attend, for each and every part, the batteries, for instance, we use the EVs, the cobalt and lithium. And as you know, these are the most critical topics in the UN report. Child labor, valuable minerals or materials to be extracted. These are all challenging issues, and of course there are certain standards to be formed.
Tedarikçi. Dolayısıyla Tier 8-9'a kadar gidiyor.
So, it goes all the way up to Tier 8 or 9, the material, and sustainability is very important all the way below. There are things to do. What do we do as Bosch? We updated our supplier catalog. Sustainability is not only about carbon emissions, but there is a 17 item. There are countries and organizations have undersigned these. We don't have the time to go into its details here, but this supplier guideline has all of these, and we have set some binding requirements into this. Close to 1,000 suppliers, more than 70% of our global suppliers have all been informed. Also, sanctions, and in choosing suppliers from now on in the future, it's not only about SQC EDD, but another S has been added, which stands for sustainability. So we look into this in our choosing criteria. These are the agenda in the automotive industry as well as in Bosch. There are some no-goes in sustainability. If one of them exists in a supplier, it will not be possible to work with that supplier in the future, and these are binding for all of us, because in order to give our world to our children, countries and organizations have to set those criteria, and both ourselves and our stakeholders have to operate accordingly. Another issue that I'm curious personally is how you manage the process. In the past, Unfortunately, we experienced the COVID pandemic and we have had certain negative experience in every area of life, as well as in supply management. We had to develop new approaches. For instance, supply chains have been broken or their resilience have been questioned, and a new normal was formed for everyone, for companies as well. In terms of sustainability goals or criteria, how was the new normal created in you? How did it change your approach and what did it affect? First of all, COVID opened the gates for a world that we knew nothing about, and we found ourselves in the middle of it. I used to do a lot of trips abroad, and for 2 years I had to sit at home, which was unprecedented for me, and I had to work from home, like most of you. This has taught us things. What did it teach us? It taught us that we didn't have to travel that much. In the future, probably I will have 130, not even 150 in my travel plans. This was the basis. The process has developed, and thanks to platforms like Teams or other platforms, we have noticed that business could be run. We have proven this. As a result of the COVID process, in the new order, I'd like to also talk about, for instance, the situation in Russia and Ukraine, and the tensions in different platforms, supply chain and management. We had to reconsider our positions. And as we did this, typical methods, for instance, having 2 or 3 suppliers at least, is not enough anymore, because 2 or 3 suppliers, if they're in the same region, let's say if they're all in Europe, the gas problem in Europe may not be resilient. So our supply method, we have shifted it to different parts of the world. For that reason, we have created a hub with our supply chain, and we took steps in order to back our regional production with regional supply chains. 2 or 3 suppliers in one region, we shifted it to different regions. For instance, if one is in Europe, another has to be in Asia now in our new positioning. And as we did this, we also do notice that sometimes because of shipment fees, for instance, bringing something from Asia to Europe may be problematic, but producing a turbine and the energy that it generates would be different. To give you some statistical information, a turbine that we use a lot, for instance, the carbon emissions that is required to produce it, in order to compensate, the turbine would have can set off the carbon that it uses in its production in 8 months. So let me share statistical information with you. In order to save time, I will answer very briefly. To give you some examples from the supply chain, drivers couldn't go in. They had to be quarantined for 2 weeks. So we learned new methods. In the past, these were methods that we questioned in the past. Now, we were not using intermodal in supply, for instance, 2 different shipment types, but making it more green. We didn't use this in the past. Now that we didn't have quick solutions, we started doing this. For instance, products come with train to Trieste, then with ships to Istanbul. And we noticed that this is greener and cheaper, and it's an alternative. It is 1 day longer, but we can put up with that. We can have more stock, 1 day more stock. In automotive, it's very important to have stock. In energy, no, but in automotive, we have to have it, but it's greener. So we have learned this method as well. We didn't have a lot of offshoring or nearshoring, because we can only supply from a few places. If it's Boeing, for instance, we continued procuring from Boeing, but we had something different as well. During COVID and after, we noticed that we have risk management in our process normally. supplier and supply chain risks. We noticed we have to manage them better. We had them in the past, but there's a difference between really doing it and pretending to do it. This was one of the most important things that we gained out of it. In addition, as we discussed before, we had carried fewer people in addition to less goods. This has contributed, yes. In addition, we organized digital meetings as we discussed. In addition, something else also did come. Our processes could be made more digital, like sharing of information, or as mentioned by Ersin, questions about supply chain could be solved. For that, we have to manage information in such a way that there could be a single point of truth and everyone could access the information there. We could improve it with our solutions. And at the end, we could eliminate inefficiencies or eliminate delays. And this way, we could look at the positioning of the supply chain and suppliers. So this has given us benefits. Not only we didn't have the offshoring or nearshoring impact, but we had a fresh look at our processes, especially in terms of risk management. This has caused us to change. Thank you. As Ersan Bey mentioned, digital transformation and digital capabilities, especially after COVID-19, they have become important. The resilience in the supply chain has also increased. Data interpretation or data use have been important topics. So in this morning's sessions, we talked about the technological or digital transformation on the energy side. So on your side, maybe for Ersin and Ersan, because Emek is already from the energy industry, but in your industries, how did this transformation happen? How did you start using data maybe in order to create a sustainable supply chain? How are you making use of data? One of my key roles in the industry is digital transition journey. And we are guiding this for 6 years with a team of with a cross-functional team. Sustainability is newer. Data is the oil of the new world. There are companies which don't produce anything but just manage data. They're the biggest companies in the world. So in the company where I work, or like in the company here, companies with real added value, why don't we use data? What do we do? As we saw upstairs today at Synchron, binding transparency and receiving diagnostic alerts and taking measures. I've seen some great examples here upstairs. And then AI, data learning by itself. And in our factories, in the supply chain, just like we saw upstairs, we can start with the visualization of data and make us warn us, show us where the problem is. This is very important in supply chain. There are thousands of data, and my friends in the supply chain, the colleagues were looking for problems, pivoting and exhaust. This is old-fashioned. This was from 20 years ago. Data can show me what is red, and this is what we're doing now. Just like we saw in the Synchron upstairs, we show you where the problem is. You see the plant, we see the piece, and we attack the problem to solve it. We should use data better and draw more benefit out of it and stop wastage. Same for production. For us, digital transition is a very comprehensive and big topic. Not only before or after COVID, but it has been on our agenda for some time. This is about digital maturity. You have a digital maturity level, and you get the chance to keep increasing it. You start from simple, and over time, you reach higher levels of maturity, and you start doing different things. In our company, procurement is where this is seen the most. And this year, actually, maybe you followed, we got the procurement digital transition award. So it's no longer what people think about is a procurement gets 3 offers and gets the cheapest one, but that's over now. What we've been discussing is that professionals which work with procurement and supply chain, they don't have this in their work now, but they're dealing with entirely different things. For instance, it's an Ersin-based title even, and it is part of our lives. So it's not about whether this should be or not, what level we're at and what should the next step be. This is what we're discussing. There are different best practices, and we look at the titles and benchmark. For instance, we say this could be helpful for us. This is a great practice. We should do the same. And we are trying to do the same to be helpful. And this increases as we do. Our award this year came as a result of 5 years effort. And we are headed towards making this helpful to the company. Our company has this roadmap for the digital, and in this roadmap, there are client-facing sides like digitizing the product, but the processes also. And in all of them, the stakeholders or institutions where these are done, we are helping in procuring these services as well. So we experience these in most of our day. So this is now an integral part of our lives. We have 3 minutes left and one last question to Emek Bey. As Ersin was talking, he talked about the traceability in the supply chain, category 1, category 2, maybe going up to 8 or 9, the tracing of the suppliers. On the Enercon side, there's a very sensitive process for supplier choice. Probably there's a very strict process. End-to-end traceability of your suppliers, especially in choosing an evaluation. Where do we see the ESG criteria and how important is sustainability in choosing your suppliers? At first, we sign an NDA with all of our suppliers and we set the main criteria, then audit for them. But the raw material, for instance, where is it procured from? Especially in risky material, we always follow them for sure, and we take an active stance. Let's say, raw material suppliers, we follow them as well and check for their situation as well, because if we don't do this, material wouldn't come to the final product, which would be something that we wouldn't wish to see. And so we follow it for sure. And lastly, as I close, we talk about what companies do or departments do. What are your personal goals or personal thoughts for sustainability? I was expecting this question, and this question could only be asked at 5. What will countries do or organizations do? But I'll try to wrap up in 1 minute. And you will get some of it, I'm sure, on your way home. 40 gigatons, 40 billion tons of emissions we generate in 2021. Similar this year. Last month, November, the global population has reached 8 billion, 35,000 more every day. Divided by 8 billion, 5 tons per person. In Turkey, it's 6 tons, they said, but it's also 5, representing global average. I generate this, you generate this, carbon emissions. So whatever we prefer, that is what the industry is producing, and producing even more. Whatever I drink, for instance, I drink in plastic container, that's what the industry produces. Of course, our choices, of course, countries and organizations make decisions and regulations matter, but everything starts with me. Another number that I will mention, I hope it will not cause you to lose your appetite. Where do the carbon emissions come from? energy industry is 25% only. Remaining 25% is agriculture. Agriculture has food and animal husbandry as well. The whole carbon emissions versus 5 ton per person or 10 tons out of 40 comes from what I eat or not eat, because 25% of the global carbon emissions comes from fruit, vegetables, and meat. 15% comes from the field coming all the way to the market, and another 15%, which means 30%, 1/3 is wastage. Even if we could save this 1/3, it would contribute greatly if we could notice that I'm talking about food, but every kind of consumption. If we did not waste what we consume, it would contribute so much for businesses as well. Per person, 50 kilo we consume. This is the same in Turkey, 50 kilos. 1 kilo meat, 35 kilos of carbon emissions. 1.5 tons of the 5 ton comes from meat. I eat meat as well, but let's at least not waste. The solution, the first step is to reduce, and the second step is to reuse whatever we use, and the third is to recycle, to turn it into added value or to product. We should preserve the world for our children and also other beings other than human beings. Thank you, Mr. Ersan Enemek. Do you have anything to add? Yes, sure. I agree 100% with what he said, nothing that I can add. And on my behalf, I have drawn some lessons as well. For instance, they throw Abraham to the fire and an ant was seen carrying water. They asked, can you put out the fire? No, but he said, the ant said, but at least I'm making an effort. So you can make your own effort. Personal awareness is the beginning of everything. It then reflects to organizations and countries as well. So it is a must. But with the people that we're together with in this conference, they can contribute. I believe we can contribute more than what we consume. For instance, in Turkey, renewable energy's share in overall energy is it 40? Okay, it's 40. This is important. 10 years ago, this was much less. So something was done, was achieved. For instance, plants were opened, new ones, renewable ones, and Bosch did certain changes. It took some measures and decreased the emissions. So, in addition to our impact, we may have a bigger impact as in our industries. This awareness is important. So, without giving up, we should have the same level of dedication. Thank you. Levent Bey, anything to add? They explained everything, especially the mathematical information that we got. I will pay attention to it. Individually speaking, it was a personal question. Recycling is very important. In Istanbul, rather than driving a car, I drive a motorcycle to emit less carbon. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention and your participation. This has been very enjoyable for me as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ersin, Ersan, Enemek, and Aziz Ünal, the moderator. Thank you for this enjoyable panel. Thank you. Family photo.
Evet, çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Böylece Enerjisa Üretim ev sahipliğinde
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of the first day of the conference. with all stakeholders. We discussed sustainability and energy, and this has been a very enjoyable day. And in the last panel, we heard about what the individual can do as well. There are many things that I'm obsessed with. Maybe in our personal chat, we can talk about this, because we talk about energy a lot, but what about agriculture? We ask, I have some personal choices. I'm vegan, for instance. And of course, I cannot say everyone should be, but my biggest sin is my long haul flights. That's not one thing that I don't give up, even though I can let go of meat. I like flying to faraway places. So I think it's very important to take a look at ourselves as well. Tomorrow we'll listen to inspiring stories. We'll talk about green hydrogen, something that we talked about today as well. We'll talk about insurance companies, and how these issues relate to insurance companies. So I'd like to thank everyone for being here till the end, and I thank everyone who followed us on their screens. Thank you.